fasting that does not require expiation. 137. With the exception of the Ramadan fast, there is no penalty for breaking any other fast, nor is it necessary to fast for 2 months as a means of atoning for past mistakes. For the Quran explicitly states that expiation is required only for the breaking of the Ramadan fast. 138. For expiation to be required due to the breaking of the Ramadan fast, an iftar, something that breaks the fast, must occur both in form and in substance. This includes eating for the purpose of sustenance, receiving medical treatment, or consuming anything or drunk with the intention of enjoyment, which is swallowed voluntarily, and intentionally, or engaging in sexual intercourse with a living person voluntarily and intentionally through one of 2 means. Ejaculation is not a requirement. For this, it is sufficient that the substance is not considered food, is not suitable for the body, or is inherently impure and repulsive, and is consumed or ingested with consent and intentionally, or if a medication is administered into the body through a route other than the mouth, no expiation is required. Likewise, intentional contact with a living person through any other means with a deceased person through the normal route, or with a living or deceased animal through any means, which results in ejaculation, falls under this ruling. However, it only requires expiation. Performing acts that are forbidden and haram in religion also leads to punishment. According to the Shafi'i school, sexual relations with a dead person or an animal require expiation, because in this case, there is contact that prevents fasting. 139. Expiation is a penalty not for failing to fast, but for breaking the fast. For this reason, if a person, just as they never intended to fast during Ramadan, also never broke the fast but instead observed the fast, fasted, only a makeup fast is required. However, according to Imam Zufar, simply observing the dawn prayer is sufficient for the fast. Therefore, even if nitrogen monoxide intention is made, the fast is considered valid if only the dawn prayer is performed. In this case, neither a makeup fast nor an expiation is required. In this case, intentionally breaking the fast requires both makeup and expiation. Furthermore, if one intentionally breaks the fast during the day without ever having intended to fast, only makeup is required. Such an unwarranted act also entails responsibility. One must repent and seek forgiveness. However, nitrogen monoxide expiation is required. Furthermore, if nitrogen monoxide intention is made at night, and one breaks the fast before noon, before halfway through the legal day, and then intentionally breaks the fast afterward, only making up the fast is required. No expiation is required. This is according to Imam al-Azam. According to 2 Imams, Imam Muhammad and Imam Abu Yusuf, if one fasted without intention or broke the fast after Zeval, making up the fast is required, but nitrogen monoxide expiation is necessary. However, if one breaks the fast before Zeval, both makeup and expiation are required. For it is possible to intend to fast before Zeval. According to Imam Malik, expiation is required for every accountable person who breaks the fast without a valid excuse. According to Imam Shafi'i, expiation is required only due to sexual intercourse, and as this act is repeated, the expiation is also repeated. Because the act of worship is of greater significance than expiations, it is not possible to combine expiations, counting multiple expiations as one in worship. 1404a. Person who has intended to fast during Ramadan. The following are some of the things that, if eaten or drunk knowingly and intentionally, require expiation: bread, meals, oil, cheese, wheat, roasted, barley, oat stalks kneaded with oil, cooked or raw meat, water, snow, hail, vegetable juices, watermelon, melon, fresh and dried fruits, the rind of a fresh and clean watermelon, a grape berry, a fresh small grape leaf, other edible leaves, plants, saffron, musk, camphor, any medicine, mud that is customarily consumed kilomini, mud that a pregnant woman craves and eats, all alcoholic beverages, tobacco, hubbles, senuff, the taste of a sugar cubes melting in the throat. In these cases, just as there is a formal break in the fast in terms of eating and drinking, there is also a substantive break in the fast in terms of their being beneficial to the body or deriving pleasure from them. 141, a stone, a porno stone, a piece of iron, a bullet, a seed, a dry-shelled nut, or an almond intentionally swallowed breaks the fast. Although it requires making up the fast, it does not require expiation. This is because, although they appear to break the fast in form, they are not usually consumed, so they do not constitute a break of the fast in substance. Likewise, swallowing a piece of paper, a piece of cotton, mud, a clump of soil, a dry blade of grass, a piece of straw, an unripe quince, a walnut kernel, whether dry or with a fresh shell or an eggshell, even if they require expiation, do not require expiation. Because, by convention, these are not considered food and are not intended for medicinal purposes. As for dry pistachios, if they are chewed while still in their shell, they require expiation. If swallowed without chewing, it does not require expiation. Even if the nut is split open, the ruling remains the same. 142 dried rice, dried millet, lentils, and fee also do not require expiation, because it is not customary to eat these. The same applies to water that enters the nose, or medicine that is administered, because in these cases, there is nitrogen monoxide intentional swallowing to break the fast. If there is only a benefit, it requires only expiation. 143. Swallowing another person's saliva, a morsel that has come out of another person's mouth, or a morsel that has come out of one's own mouth and remained outside for a moment also requires only expiation. No atonement is required, because by nature, a person is repulsed by these things. According to a valid narration, blood is also included in this category. However, swallowing a friend's spit requires expiation for the Ramadan fast, because one derives pleasure from dry herbs that cause intoxication, such as opium, are also included. Conclusion: expiation is intended to deter people from certain actions. This restriction applies to things that are usually eaten or drunk, and to which one naturally feels a tendency, since people will naturally avoid things they are repulsed by nature. There is no need to force them regarding these matters. 144. If someone, while fasting during Ramadan, accidentally puts something they normally eat into their mouth, they must immediately remove it from their mouth and discard it as soon as they remember that they are fasting. However, if they swallow it without spitting it out, an expiation is required. However, if they spit it out but then swallow it after it has cooled, only a make-up fast is required. For swallowing, such a thing is disgusting. 145. If someone eats the pre-dawn meal, sahur, believing the sun has not yet risen, even though it has, or breaks the fast, iftar, believing the sun has set, even though it has not, they must make up the fast. No expiation is required, because they did not break the fast intentionally. 146. If a man asks his wife during Ramadan, "Look, has the dawn broken or not?" and after she looks and informs him that it has not yet broken, and he then commits an act contrary to fasting, but if it is later determined that dawn had indeed broken, he is only required to make up the fast. Nitrogen monoxide, expiation is required. However, if the woman commits such an act, knowing that dawn has broken, she must also pay expiation. 147 IF. 2 people testify that the sun has set, and 2 others testify that the sun has not yet set. And if iftar is broken based on this, and it is later determined that the sun had not yet set, there is only a need for make-up prayer. No kafara is required. 148. Just as the testimony of 2 people is sufficient for proof in civil matters, so too is it sufficient regarding fasting, even if they testify to it. If a person eats and it is later determined that dawn has broken, both making up the fast and paying expiation are required. There is consensus on The testimony regarding the absence of dawn, stating that dawn has not broken, cannot contradict the testimony regarding the presence of dawn, stating that dawn has broken. However, if there are only a few people testifying in this manner, only the missed prayer is required for the testimony of a single person regarding the dawn's breaking is not a sufficient proof. 149. A person who eats something unintentionally, or who, believing the dawn has not yet broken when it has, or while asleep, commits an act contrary to fasting, and then, believing their fast has been broken, intentionally eats again, no expiation is required. If they break their fast knowing that the fast is not invalidated by such forgetfulness, according to Imam al-Azam, no expiation is required either. This is the correct view, for there is a doubt that the fast has been broken. I-501 who experiences an uncontrollable gag reflex, or who accidentally swallows water while rinsing their mouth, or who looks at a woman's beauty, if they intend to break the fast during Ramadan, believing that the fast has been invalidated by this nitrogen monoxide expiation, is required. However, if one breaks the fast knowing that the fast is not invalidated by this, expiation is required, for there is nitrogen monoxide. Room for doubt in this matter. 151. If a person uses a miswak or engages in backbiting during the day in Ramadan and breaks their fast believing that their fast has been invalidated as a result, no expiation is required. However, if they have learned that the fast is not invalidated by this, expiation is required. 152. If a person experiences nocturnal emission on a day of Ramadan and breaks their fast, the following applies. If they believe that their fast had been invalidated by this emission, no expiation is required. However, if they knew that the fast would not be broken by this, expiation is required. 153. If someone engages in sexual intercourse during Ramadan while forgetting that they are fasting and withdraws as soon as they remember they are fasting, their fast is not broken. Any subsequent ejaculation does not invalidate the fast. This is akin to an involuntary emission. However, if one remains still without moving until ejaculation occurs, only a make-up fast is required. But if one stimulates oneself, atonement is required. For in this case, the act is considered complete. Retracting and engaging in sexual intercourse again also requires such expiation. If such an act occurs at the time of the second dawn, the ruling remains the same. 154. If a woman falls asleep or temporarily loses her mind after intending to fast, and her husband engages in sexual intercourse with her, her fast is invalidated. She is only required to make up the fast, and no expiation is required. 155. A fasting woman who on a day of Ramadan surrenders herself to a child or a mentally ill person and engages in sexual intercourse is unanimously required to pay expiation. 156. If sexual intercourse is forced upon someone during Ramadan, the person who was forced to engage in it is only required to make amends. No expiation is required. Coercion involves the use of force, taking a life, cutting off a limb, organ, or beating in a manner that could result in any of these. Breaking the fast due to coercion, involving only beating, to the extent of causing sorrow and pain, or simply imprisonment, does not waive the expiation. 157. If a traveler, having returned to his homeland, country of residence, before sunset and having eaten nothing, intends to fast and then intentionally breaks his fast, no expiation is required. If a person who is insane recovers and regains their senses before sunset, having already made the intention to fast, and then breaks their fast, no expiation is required of them either. 158. If a person who has broken their fast encounters a situation that makes it permissible for them not to fast that day, the expiation is waived. For example, a healthy person who has intended to fast during Ramadan, even if they break their fast during the day but then faint on the same day, or if a woman begins her menstrual period, or if they fall ill to the point of being unable to fast, they are only required to make up the fast later. No expiation is required. This is the correct opinion. These are divine excuses. However, if such a person injures themselves and becomes unable to fast, according to the correct opinion, no expiation is required, because they themselves caused this situation. Furthermore, if they set out on a journey, voluntarily or under coercion after breaking the fast nitrogen monoxide, expiation is required. Because travel is not a valid excuse, breaking the fast after setting out on a journey, however, requires only making up the fast later, because one was not actually obligated to fast on that day. 159. If a person who began a journey while fasting during Ramadan returns home to retrieve something they forgot, eats something, and then sets out again, they must pay expiation. This is because by returning home, they have left the state of travel and are considered resident while eating. However, if he eats something after passing the houses of the town and then returns home to eat again, nitrogen monoxide expiation is required, even if he completely abandons the journey after eating in this manner. No expiation is required, for this eating occurred under a permission rusad. According to the Zahariya school of thought, fasting while traveling is originally impermissible because it contradicts the text, the ruling of the Quran. According to other schools of thought, the traveler is free to choose. If he wishes, he may fast, and if he wishes, he may not. He may make up the fast later. However, in our opinion, it is better for him to fast if it does not cause him harm.